Super. Welcome back, everyone. I'm so excited to have you back for one of the highlights of the annual meeting, in my opinion, and that is our Senior Leaders Town Hall. Before I get started, though, I would like to recognize a very special guest that we have in the audience, the Medal of Honor recipient, Master Sergeant Retired Larry Petrie. Would you please? Well, I'm very, very glad that you decided to join our town hall again this year. And I would like to tell you that we can't do what we do without our wonderful forum sponsors. And we do have, you met Lindsay this morning from Geico. Geico is also sponsoring our forum today. And we have Brian Schlitt, who is a representative from Geico, here with us. And so let's give Geico a round of applause. Thank you, Brian. At this time, we would normally recognize our 2018 AUSA Volunteer Family of the Year, but in true citizen warrior fashion, Staff Sergeant Vincent Pastor could not take today off, and he had to go back to New Jersey with his family. However, we were very lucky to have our Family of the Year sponsor, Gold Star sponsor, the Wounded Warrior Project, meet with the Pastor family earlier on Monday, where they awarded him a wonderful basket full of goodies and things that we hopefully make them feel special. So at this time, I'd like to call up to the stage retired Lieutenant General Mike Lennington, who will tell you a little bit about this extraordinary family. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chief Executive Officer of the Wounded Warrior Project and a very good friend of mine, Mike Lennington.
Thank you, Patty. As she said, I had a great opportunity yesterday to meet the Pastor family, and they are truly an exceptional family. I'm also honored to be in the presence of Medal of Honor recipient Leroy Petrie this morning. Sergeant Petrie, thank you for your continued work with our nation's wounded, ill, and injured service members and your advocacy on behalf of all of the veterans we serve. Thank you very much, sir. It is truly an honor for me to be here today, represent Wounded Warrior Project and honoring the AUSA Army Volunteer Family of the Year. Soldiers and families are clearly at the centerpiece of everything we do at Wounded Warrior Project, as clearly 68% of our active alumni, wounded service members, families, and caregivers, 68% are Army, active, Guard and Reserve, and transitioned Army service members. Army families are truly the highlight of and strength of our Army. They make us whole, and they enable our readiness, as you've heard in the first two family forums, not just in training, but also as service members transition. No family better exemplifies that strength and resilience, as does the Pastor family. Staff Sergeant Vincent Pastor and his family demonstrate true embodiment of spirit and sacrifice and volunteerism. Staff Sergeant Pastor volunteers his time and energy through wide-ranging activities, including working with the Backpacks for Life, an organization that assists soldiers transitioning from military to civilian employment, and volunteering for the Sergeant Nutter Run and several other nonprofit and community activities in Mount Laurel where they reside. Sergeant Pastor's wife Tanya and their three daughters, as you see in the picture, Angelina, 13, Isabella, 11, and Sabrina, 8, each provided exceptional service in their community and volunteer immensely in service to Army families and their community there in Mount Laurel. Tanya alone completed approximately 600 volunteer hours as a Girl Scout leader. Angelina completed 576 hours of volunteer service. Isabella, 672 hours. And youngest daughter, Sabrina, a whopping 288 volunteer hours. The Pastors have shown not just a willingness to go above and beyond to help others, but a true understanding of what service means and the importance of volunteerism in their military community. On behalf of the Association of the United States Army and Wounded Warrior Project, let's please give Staff Sergeant Vincent Pastor and his family a big round of applause and appreciation. A couple seconds on Wounded Warrior Project briefly, if I may. I'd ask all the Army leaders, family members, and caregivers in the room today to please know that Wounded Warrior Project is there for our wounded service members and service members of all branches, not just the Army, as they transition from uniform service to life on the other side, as I call it. Our programs in engagement, mental health and wellness, physical health and wellness, benefits and career counseling, employment and career placement, as long as long-term rehabilitative care is there for the Army. And I ask, as you help your service members transition from life in uniform to life on the other side, please leverage the assets and the resources we bring to the table to helping our veterans transition. Transitioning, as you've all heard in the first two family forums, is difficult for any soldier as they leave the military. It's our tribe, it's our family. Doing so as a wounded veteran is doubly difficult, and that's why we're here, and it's the only reason we're in existence. So please leverage us. Patty, thank you, and AUSA. Thank you for the Army leadership for being here today, and I look forward to a wonderful Town Hall 3. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mike Lennington. So next, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Lieutenant General Gwen Bingham, the Assistant Chief of Staff for Installation Management Command. Lieutenant General Bingham is the Principal Advisor to Army senior leaders on installation policy, plans, and resources, which includes soldier and family readiness, installations, whether at fort, camp, depot, armory, or reserve center, support the readiness of active duty, National Guard, and Army Reserve soldiers and their families. Ma'am, thank you so much for agreeing to moderate this town hall for a second year in a row. I think she did such a great job, last year. So I introduce you, please, a warm welcome to Lieutenant General Bingham.
Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much, Patty, for that very kind introduction. It's a thrill for me to be here. Before I begin my remarks, I do want to take a moment first to thank AUSA and to recognize Ms. Patty Barron for all of her hard work to make these family forums a reality. I got a chance to see her in action for all three family forums, and I tell you, she's just a jewel, and we appreciate you. These forums provide a great opportunity to discuss important issues facing our soldiers, civilians, retirees, and our family members. Thank you for being a great partner and an advocate for Army families. How about a round of applause for Ms. Patty Barron and AUSA? Thank you so very much. Now, I'd like to recognize at this time an extremely important group of people, the Army Survivor Advisory Working Group, or SOG as we call it for short. This group meets twice a year to make recommendations on how our Army can best support our surviving family members. Chaired by the Chief of Staff of the Army, the SOG is comprised of key Army leaders and survivor advisors from all three components. Our survivor advisors best understand the challenges faced and sacrifices made by our Army families, as each one has lost a soldier, whether it be their child or their spouse. They remain advocates for survivor needs in their communities. President Trump, in honor of Gold Star Mothers and Families Day on the 30th of September of this year, recently proclaimed, and I quote, "Although they have suffered unimaginable sorrow, Gold Star families have charged forward with inspiring strength and determination, giving selflessly to their communities and our country. They support our men and women in uniform, our wounded warriors, and our veterans. Their unselfish leadership fosters patriotism and encourages us to consider what we can do to be better citizens." End quote. The Army Survivor Advisory Working Group embodies this sentiment by elevating survivor quality of life issues from the survivor community. Today, we will honor the departing members of our Army Survivor Advisory Working Group who have set aside their personal losses and shared their perspective and experience to improve survivor quality of life. But before we do that, I would like to ask all of our survivors, our Gold Star families that we have here in the audience, to please stand so that we might honor and recognize you. Our Gold Star families, please stand. Thank you. Thank you for your love, your support, and your sacrifice. Thank you so very much. We vow never to forget you and your loved ones. Thank you so very much. At this time, I'd like to ask the Secretary of the Army, our Chief of Staff of the Army, and the Sergeant Major of the Army, and our awardees, Ms. Stephanie Crotty, Mr. Kevin Lynch, and Ms. Cecilia Pena, to please join us on the stage now for the presentations of the awards. And while they're making their way up here, let me read a little bit about their accomplishments. These three survivors were instrumental in addressing difficult issues such as survivor grief support, expediting replacement of survivor Gold Star pins, and a communication campaign to educate soldiers on the importance of SGLI and maintaining a current DD Form 93 to designate beneficiaries in the event of service members' death. Their compassion, profound insight, and tenacity improved the quality of life experienced by surviving soldiers and family members. Their contributions to the nation are in keeping with the highest traditions of public service and are a great credit to themselves and the United States Army.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated for the duration of all of the award citations. The Secretary of the Army Public Service Award is presented to Ms. Stephanie Crotty for extraordinary service to the Army Survivor Advisory Working Group from August 2015 through October 2018. Ms. Crotty served with exemplary courage and resilience following her husband's death, Lieutenant Thomas Crotty. The Secretary of the Army Public Service Award is presented to Mr. Kevin Lynch for extraordinary service to the Army Survivor Advisory Working Group from August 2015 to October 2018. During this period, Mr. Lynch served with exemplary courage and resilience following his son's death, Specialist Kyle Lynch. The Secretary of Army Public Service Award is presented to Ms. Pena for extraordinary service to the Army Survivor Advisory Working Group from August 2015 to October 2018. Ms. Pena served with exemplary courage and resilience following her son's death, Captain Paul Pena.
Let's move in and get a group shot here.
At this time, if we could have all senior leaders and awardees depart the stage, we'll be setting up for the town hall. Thank you.
Gwen, this only lasts 5 minutes, right?
Just 5 minutes, Chief.
All the good questions go to the person who's out of uniform today.
There's only one guy not in a uniform.
Okay, so at this time, we will transition to our town hall portion of this event. As we finalize our stage preparation, it's a great honor to be your moderator for this year's AUSA Town Hall with our Army senior leaders. Today, you will hear about our #1 priority, readiness. Families of our soldiers make sacrifices for the nation that contribute to Army readiness and soldier lethality. This plays an important part in achieving mission success. The Army is committed to providing the care, support, and services necessary to enable self-reliance and to ensure a ready Army. Today, we will hear from our 23rd Secretary of the Army, the Honorable Mark Esper. Secretary Esper is a 1986 graduate of the U.S. Military Academy and received his commission in the infantry. Upon completion of Ranger and Pathfinder training, he served in the regular Army for over a decade, including service in the Gulf War with the 101st Airborne Division.
Cool.
He later commanded an airborne rifle company in Europe. Following active duty, he served in both the Virginia and District of Columbia National Guard and the Army Reserve before retiring in 2007. Secretary Esper and his wife, Leah, have been married for 28 years and have 3 adult children. Secretary Esper and Leah, welcome and thank you all for taking time out of your schedules today. How about a round of applause for our Secretary, Secretary Esper.
And God bless you, Leah, for doing that for 28 years. The sacrifice you've made. It's only been 1 year. The sacrifice you've made.
Holly Ann's next, don't worry.
Our 39th Chief of Staff of the Army, General Mark Milley, is also here to share his insights for a strong and ready total force, inclusive of our soldiers, civilians, and families. I want to also recognize his wife, Holly Ann Milley, who works in tandem with General Milley on family readiness. General Milley and Holly Ann, thank you both for joining us this afternoon. And finally, our 15th Sergeant Major of the Army, SMA Daniel Daly, will provide his perspective on soldier and family support and ensuring readiness across our Army. We are fortunate to have both the SMA and his wife, Holly Daly, who are in their 4th year as part of the Army leadership team. Together, they work tirelessly to improve the quality of life for all families and champion the issues and concerns of our all-volunteer force. SMA Daly and Holly, thank you both for joining us this afternoon. Welcome. All righty, so the stage is set. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Secretary Esper, General Milley, and SMA Daly for their opening remarks. How about another round of applause for our senior leaders? So we'll begin first with SMA Daly.
Wasn't expecting that.
Okay. Wasn't expecting that.
But I'm ready.
Go ahead, I'll clean up.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Secretary, General Milley, General Bingham, thank you for hosting us today. It's an absolute privilege and an honor to be back here for a fourth year, as Holly and I have survived this journey as your Sergeant Major of the Army and Mrs. Sergeant Major of the Army, and we couldn't be more than happy and privileged to be able to serve you every single day. So thank you for your continued support. I know there's many family members, but also many people that continue to support us in this room, to include the individuals that are putting on this great association venue with the Army Association. Let's give the Army Association a big round of applause.
Cool.
I always like to start everything with the fact that today is a great day to be a soldier. And every day is a great day to be a soldier. And I'm proud to say that I said this last year, is that we're not perfect. By no means we aren't. And your job is to help us identify the things that we need to fix so we can continue to take good care of our soldiers and families. So good that I'll make the statement I made again last year, is that we take better care of our soldiers and families than any other organization in the world, bar none. I believe that.
Cool.
And as we stay on the theme of readiness, and you'll hear both the Secretary and the Chief say this as well, is that readiness includes our families. Because ready families build ready soldiers. Soldiers that are ready to fight and win our nation's wars without having to worry about what's going on in the home front. And our job is to do that. Build a ready and resilient force capable of defeating any foe or any adversary that may be in our country's way. And it's a big task. Resources are limited. And the Chief and the Secretary, if you've heard their speeches over the last several days, they are tuning those resources to make sure that our soldiers, our warriors on the face of the battlefield, have the most modern and most capable equipment. So on that theme, we have to make sure that when we take care of our soldiers, we also take care of our family members. The more than 2.2 million of them, including 470,000 spouses and over 830,000 children within our ranks across our force. And it takes time. It takes money, it takes resources, and it takes knowledge and experience, of which we share that task together as an Army and a force. But I'd ask you, as the continued theme that I carried last year as well, is it is your job to help us identify our weaknesses and our gaps and the things that we need to do in order to prove that service to our soldiers and families. But it's also your job to help us get rid of the things that we don't need, so we can preserve those resources and put them where the priorities of the Secretary and the Chief allow us to continue to be the premier fighting force throughout the world. I look forward to your questions today, ladies and gentlemen, and it is an honor and a privilege for me to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, SMA. Next, we'll hear from our Chief of Staff of the Army, General Milley.
Well, thanks, Gwen. And just a couple of comments. First, ditto everything the Sergeant Major said. It is a great day to be a soldier, and I'm extraordinarily proud to be your Chief of Staff. As Holly Daly and Holly Milley and Leah Espa traveled around the Army and different posts, locations, etc., lots of people giving feedback. And they meet with spouses, they meet with soldiers, and they get great feedback. That all gets fed back into the Army. So one of the things today we would want, the three of us would want, is feedback from all of you. And I think there's some folks online as well. And we have thick skins up here, so we can handle it. And if there's things out there that aren't working right, they're broken, they're challenges, they're questions in someone's mind, then they're probably questions in someone else's mind. So out of this forum, it's important for us, as the senior leaders of the Army, that you give us feedback, you put rocks in our rucksack, you give us some homework to do. As Sergeant Major said, we've got a very large Army. We're the third largest organization in the world. And we're international. We're spread out throughout the entire world in 140 different countries, as well as here in continental United States. It's a very complex organization. It's layered, it's hierarchical, it's lateral, left and right. It's a very, very big organization. But at the end of the day, the three guys on the stage right now are personally responsible and accountable to you, the soldiers and the families, and the American people, to make sure that our soldiers and families are being taken care of. And this is not about altruism. It's not about just feeling good and loving families for the sake of loving families. That's not what this is about. This is about readiness. Almost 60%, about 54, 55% or so of the active duty Army is married, about 38% or so in the Guard, and 45 or 46%, something like that, in the reserves are married. So a big percentage of the force is married, and on average they have 2 children. That has a readiness impact on their soldier, on their soldier who's serving, whether it's active or in the reserve component, doesn't matter. The family has a direct cause and effect link to the readiness of that soldier. If that soldier believes that their family is being taken care of, if that soldier believes that they have a good house and there's proper school district to go to, and that they got good medical care and so on, then that soldier is far more likely to focus in on their day-to-day tasks in order to develop their military skills, or if they're deployed, to focus on the mission at hand. So this really is all about readiness. And that's why when we laid out our priorities, of readiness, modernization, and taking care of families and soldiers, it's not just a bumper sticker. It's not something that we take lightly. It's very integral to the overall health of the force. It's very integral to the overall readiness of the force. So please let us know. We've all experienced our entire lives, life in the military. Holly and I have made 20 moves, and as many of you know, she's a nurse, and she's worked her entire life, even today, her entire life in the military. And her experience reflects that of many spouses in the military. So we know what it's like. We know what it's like to bring up a family in the military. Sergeant Major Daly knows that. Secretary Esper knows that. So please let us know, because we really do want to make it better for our soldiers and our families every day, because it has a direct readiness impact, which then has a direct impact on the security of the United States. So thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'll turn the mic over to Secretary Esper.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
I think both the Sergeant Major and the Chief of Staff said everything that I would have said. I would just like to add a little bit in terms of how important this is to me, because I can't think of any meeting this week that is as important as this one this afternoon. And why is that so? The first message I sent to the field back in November, nearly a year ago, was that the importance it would be for me to take care of our families and to make sure that we provided everyone the quality of life and the opportunities that they deserve and that they demand, if you will. And so I've made it my priority as I go around the Army, and I've done a lot of going around the Army in the past 12 months to do that. My wife, Lee, has traveled with me. She's been an incredible asset. General Bingham mentioned we've been married 28 years. Actually, our 29th anniversary was this weekend. And I will tell you that in those 29 years, she was with me.
God bless her.
She was with me for 20 of those 21 years I was in the service. We had 2 kids in the military. Our first 5 years in the service together, first 4 years we moved 5 times. We've had our share of household goods lost and damaged. We've had our challenges with health care. We've seen it all. But when I go around to the garrisons and posts and concerns, my last one was in Kaiserslautern just a week ago, I tend to do 3 things. We tend to do 3 things: a town hall, we meet with the FRGs, and we meet with spouses. And then Leah doubles down and goes out and visits the CDCs and the hospitals and all that. So it's very important for me to get that feedback. We tend to have very candid discussions. As the chief and the sergeant major noted, it's important that we hear from you. We know what your priorities are. There are limited resources, so we can make trade-offs between them, but we need to find out really what you want, what your expectations are, and if we can't meet them, to be candid with you about the whys and the whats. But it is very important that we take care of our families for all the reasons that were mentioned here. It does get down to readiness. A soldier who knows that his family is taken care of, that they have a good roof over their head, that the paychecks are coming on time, that the kids are being taken care of. That allows them to focus on 100% on their mission, on their training, on their readiness. And so that is why it is so very important to me, to the three of us, and to our spouses. So with that, thank you very much, and turn it back over to General Bingham.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and happy anniversary. Okay, so now it's time for some questions from the audience. If you have a question for one of our senior leaders, please raise your hand and a staff member will approach you with a microphone, or you can come to one of the two mics that's on both sides of the room. I will call out on you one at a time to stand and ask your question, and I just ask that you please be concise with your questions so that we can address as many questions as possible. We also have staff in the back of the room that are monitoring Facebook Live streaming webcast for questions from our viewers. Those questions will be printed and brought to me. So, shall we get started?
We shall.
Okay.
And any question I can't answer, Chip Lucky said he would.
First question, please.
Hi, the question I would like to ask is, this year has been what many has called the worst moving season in a long time due to the gross negligence of the moving companies. What is the Army's plan to hold these companies accountable in order to keep PCS season from being a financial burden on military families? And will there be any transparency for families to see those accountability actions or repercussions on the moving companies?
Is there a lawyer in the house, please?
We have General Sullivan in the house.
Well, ma'am, thank you for the question, and I'll start to, because this falls right in the portfolio of taking care of our soldiers, and mostly affected is our junior level soldiers because we ask them to move quite a bit. So we have exceeded the capacity of our civilian counterparts that do moving for our soldiers, and this is not just an Army problem, it's a Department of Defense problem, and we've identified that as a Department of Defense. Transcom is working hard to be able to remedy that problem. Some of this is an industry problem that's going to take some time and effort because of the amount of load we place on them during the peak summer periods. What we need you to do, though, is don't be frustrated by process. And what do I mean by this? You got to take the time. You got to fill out the paperwork. You have to account for damages, and we have to hold those carriers responsible. When we don't do that, because we sometimes feel frustrated or belabored by the bureaucratic process, it allows them to continue that behavior. So what we're asking is better informed. One thing the Army is doing is working hard to get more people on the ground to come out and do site visits to your moves to help you through that process and help you identify those AAR actions. I personally have asked Transcom to go see some of our major installations during what I call the hike peak period. We asked them to go down to Fort Bliss, Texas during the Sergeant Major of the Army move as they PCS'd out from graduation, and they're taking those feedback from those families. And we've met, not we, me personally, but Transcom has met with the carriers on several occasions to figure out how we move forward and identify some of these remedies. I know the Secretary is going to talk to you about some of the things of helping easing the burden against the industry as well, because some of that we cause just based upon the number of families that we move during high peak times. Mr. Secretary?
Sure, just briefly, I will tell you this, that I've had a conversation already with the Secretary of the Navy, Richard Spencer, about this issue. The Navy is experiencing similar challenges. He's already done some outreach to the industry side, and they've offered some ideas that I think that are worth looking at. So, for example, as the Sergeant Major said, summer we all know is a peak moving season. 40% of all moves happen in the summer. And so one of the proposals that the industry has brought up is, well, maybe you don't need to move your single soldiers during the summer. And if you just did that, that takes off significant percentage points of people you're trying to move during that bulk period and may reduce the amount of lost and damaged household goods. So that's one of many ideas they put forward. The Secretary of Navy, Secretary of Air Force, and I plan to get together on this. We found that we are more effective as a team. That's why many of you have probably seen, and we'll talk about later, for example, the letter we sent to the governors with regard to spousal hiring. The more that we can do together as the three services gives us a lot more effectiveness, a lot more energy, if you will, and to try and make changes that will move the ball forward.
Is General Sullivan in the room anywhere? Yes, sir. Yeah. All right, Ranger. This is our G4. So he personally works a lot of this stuff with Transcom, and first of all, we know it's a significant issue, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk about some of the things, to include the accountability issue, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So, sir, as described, this past moving season, in particular, given a nationwide shortage of drivers as well as labor crews, the capacity was overtaxed. And the peak move period, again, the 90 days over the summer months, specifically the week before 4th of July weekend and the week after, we were moving on the order of about 16,000 families during that time frame. So Transcom's committed, sir, to building capacity, but at the same time holding those carriers accountable who did not perform to standard. And they are working aggressively on that, doing both of those in tandem. And also coming back with the repercussions for some of those companies. There are legal implications to some of that, but Transcom is fully vested in holding the carriers accountable, making sure those that have not met the standards are no longer eligible for business, but at the same time growing the capacity and to the extent we can smooth out the workflow over the summer months so we can do it in a more incremental way and avoid perhaps some of the capacity issues we had this past season.
So in terms of holding people accountable, that's referenced something that occurs in the past, and the other half of the problem is looking forward to fix to the future. So in holding people accountable, one of her questions was, will there be transparency? How will family members know that carrier X, Y, or Z was held accountable?
So I'll have to take that for action and
Right.
work with that with
That'd be a
Transcom to
good
the extent that
idea.
that can be
So,
publicized.
we don't have, the short answer is, we don't have an answer to your question. It's a great question, though. I'm kind of curious myself now. So I want to know, a report into the Secretary of the Army and I, all the miscreant carriers, a list, A through Z, all the ones that are running afoul of proper service, the grade sheets, you know, this guy got an A+, that guy got a B, that guy got a D or an E or whatever. And what actions, if any, are being done to hold them accountable either financially or in some other way? I don't know. Where's the lawyers in the House? We got a lawyer in the House? That's very good.
It's
So,
the first meeting we've ever had a lawyer.
well, we don't need, so I'll be my own lawyer. So,
That might be a good thing, sir. It
the
might be a good
long,
thing.
the long and the short of it is, though, we owe you an answer, a better answer than we're giving you right now in terms of transparency of accountability. If you could give your name and a way to contact you to Gwen Bingham at the end, we will circle back with you with a more thorough answer on the transparency of accountability. The second part of the question is the fix going forward. I'd like a little bit more than Transcom's working it. And I know the Secretary's doing his thing at the secretarial level, but Transcom's the one who executes there's a policy issue, that's the Secretary's working with OSD, and then there's an execution level. This sounds like, smells like, tastes like execution level, which is Transcom, the COCOM. They're the ones who oversee the joint travel regulations and execution of joint travel regulations. We have an Army officer, General Lyons, who's in command of Transcom, first time ever. But I'd like to allow the 2 and 3 stars take one swing at the bat and get back to me on the way ahead and what's the proposed fix going into the next moving season. This has been a consistent theme that the household goods and the movement thing is just all hosed up. So there's probably more to it than even just this question's implying. And we probably need to dig into it, deeper than what we already have.
Acknowledge,
Okay?
sir. Acknowledge.
You're
I
blunt.
want to up that a little bit. There's this old rule of thumb that says sunlight is a great disinfectant. I think what we need to get to is a point where somewhere on an Army website, we can report to families which companies, where they are, have been issued a letter of warning or have been suspended. So when they make choices, we know who they are. And it also sends a message to the companies who also compete in the commercial sector that they're on notice, much like the Better Business Bureau does. So if we can get to that, if the lawyers can clear that, if my Secretariat staff can work that, I'd like to get to that point. I think that'll aid a great deal on the transparency side.
Acknowledge, Mr. Secretary. You got it.
Thank you. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, sir, that helps. Thank you.
Anything else we should consider?
Not that I can think of right now. Thank you.
Okay. But report your claims. It only works if
Yeah.
they get the feedback. Sergeant Major was just pointing out some stats to me. We need to know the feedback needs to go in so we can start, giving these guys black marks and putting them on the bad kid list. So that's important. That's critical.
And that is very important. That's why I mentioned it, because it's something we identified. I was showing the Secretary. The stat is that the transportation companies, as I know that, and I've had some bad moves myself, they have a 90% approval rate during non-peak and 80% during peak time. So that's that's telling that they are doing a good job. If they are not, I'm not defending them, but if they're not, we need to tell them they're not. We need to take the time to document it, as hard as it is sometimes. When you go through it, I promise that the system is there to be able to protect us and our soldiers. We just have to utilize it. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Here's another question. Young people are questioning marrying a soldier as they don't see how they can have a career and be married to a soldier. What advice do you have for the young men and women that find themselves on the fence due to high spouse unemployment?
Be a soldier, don't get married. Kidding. Kidding. That was a joke. Sorry. Just kidding. I love you.
Yeah.
I love you. I beg forgiveness.
We need to phone a friend. Phone a friend. Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to speak from a soldier's perspective. My wife having a career.
Help me, Sergeant Major.
Yeah.
I may have lost the chief of staff, so now I may lose the sergeant major.
You're welcome, Mr. Secretary. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I would tell you first and foremost, and my wife and I have been on this journey for almost 30 years, married 25 of it as of 2 days ago. So thank you, Holly, for staying with me throughout that.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was so bad.
It was bad.
That was so bad.
It wasn't as bad as saying don't marry somebody, sir. But
Let me just take the stick and stick it in my eye. Nice.
I would tell you that my wife quit a career, and I'm not saying to do this, but first and foremost, this is a journey that you have to understand you have to do together, and it's going to come with challenges. But you also should not be put behind by those challenges. We got to encourage our spouses to get out there and seek help. Every time I go to one of our transition assistance centers and at one of our installations, one thing I do at visit every installation is I say, how many spouses come in here and ask for the help? Because they're allowed to help in excess capacity. And I would tell you, if you talk to our wonderful professionals that work for IMCOM, they would tell you there's no such thing as a limit to excess capacity when it comes to family members. And we got to encourage our family members to go out there and seek that help. It is a very challenging thing with PCS, especially our licensed professional spouses. You know, and transferability is something that we're working all the way at the administrative level right now. I can tell you there's a lot of energy behind it, all the way from the First Lady down through DOD, even here in the Army. And I can give a chance for both Holly Ann and Miss Holly to speak about some of the work they've done with that. But it's a journey that you're going to have to renew and a new challenge every time you PCS. We're working hard, and the Secretary's working hard on policy in the Army to help ease that transition when, in the case where we have jobs on installations, open up capability for things like child care and MWR and non-appropriated funds, and we're doing everything we can. But we really look to you also for more ideas. What else can we do in order to improve that experience for our men and women? Because of the force, as you heard the Chief say, 60% of them married. 75% of that force is enlisted, and the majority of our enlisted spouses have to work in most cases to make ends meet. So we still need your help. We think we're doing a lot, but it's probably not enough, and we need you to help us identify ways that we continue to improve. Chief, Mr. Secretary.
I'll just two things. On the first part of the question, I'll just say follow your heart. On the second part, I would say this much. We are doing a lot of things on the policy front to improve spousal hiring. Our spouses are overqualified and underemployed in many states, many locations. The licensure programs range from 20 to 30 states out there, depending on your type of profession. We help with the certification costs, but still needs to be done. Still more needs to be done. I speak a lot with members of Congress about that. There is bipartisan support on the Hill to help with spousal hiring. But again, there's more we can do to help on that front. Just improving our own civilian spousal hiring in the Army. We're making a lot of strides there. I've put a lot of effort into it, as have the Chief and the Sergeant Major. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, today. So a lot going on this front to make sure we do it. The other part of this with regard to the spousal hiring that is key is to see to the degree, and I've spoken about this, I know the Chief and I has as well in a hearing, can we slow down PCS moves? Can we give soldiers more choice in their assignments? So if they want to stay in one location longer than 3 years because the kids are in a good school where the spouse has a great job, then we need to look to accommodate that. When I speak about talent management, that's what I'm referring to. That's an aspect of talent management that I'm thinking of. Now, it may mean that soldier may not get the broadening assignments that he or she needs to become a general officer or a sergeant major of the Army one day. But you know, in the private sector, that's okay. People make their their decisions, professional decisions, for any number of reasons. Not everybody's reaching for the top. And so if somebody wants to make that decision, as long as they're performing their job well, if they want to stay at one location for a while, I'm okay with that. I know the Army staff is due back to us in a month or so with some options to slow down PCS moves. Most of those are driven, though, by brand new soldiers or by PCSing back and forth overseas. But that's my ambition when I speak about talent management, is giving soldiers more choices, more preferences in their assignments. Army requirements will still come first, but that gives us another tool to allow folks spouses to set up a career, establish themselves in their profession at one particular location. So.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'll address.
Can I get an opportunity to dig out of my hole?
Yes, Chief, always.
Just kidding. I can't dig out of it now. So here's what the young couple that you referred to, what advice would you give them if they're contemplating marrying a soldier sort of thing? I would, I'm not great on advice, I suppose, in that angle, but I would say, like anything in life, go into it eyes open. Make no mistake about how hard it is to be married and raise a family in the United States Army. It is not easy. Holly and I have been together now for 33 years, married, and 35 years together since we first met. And raising two kids, as almost everyone in this room has come up through the Army. And you look back on your experiences, and you mentioned household goods and moving 20 moves, a dozen or so high schools and grammar schools, changing friends in and out, dad going off to war for 17 consecutive years every other year, not knowing whether dad's going to get hurt or wounded or shot or whatever, right? That wears on you. That wears on a kid. That wears on a family, day in and day out, day in and day out. The stress on Army families is off the charts compared to that which is experienced in civil society. And the pay and compensation is not the same, no matter how many times we send you letters saying you paid more and all that kind of stuff. So it's not. So, and the stability of life and the movement of life and the transient nature of life is very, very difficult. So to anyone out there who is considering marrying a soldier, if you love the person, great, drive on, but do it with your eyes open. Understand that which you're getting involved in. We are not the Boy Scouts. We are not some other company or corporation or something else in the world. We are not a job. This is not a job. This is a way of life. This is a calling. It's much more religious in nature than is anything else, in fact. This is a way of life and a calling, and it may cost you your life. It may, look at, where's Petrie at? Where you at there, Ranger? Is he still here? There he is. It cost him his arm. And there's Gold Star families right here in the front. It cost them their loved one. This is a hard business, and no one should enter this business thinking that it's anything other than a lot of sacrifice for this nation. So I would counsel anyone. I wouldn't be afraid to marry a soldier, I suppose, but I would counsel do it with your eyes open and understand what you're getting involved with. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'll address the microphone to my left.
Look at that. Miss Lucky stood up. Look at that. Miss Lucky stood up. Mrs. Milley, would you stand up? It's going to be one long night. Oh, man.
She wished she heard that speech 35 years ago.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My question is regarding EFMP families. So EFMP families are often moved to communities where appropriate services and specialty providers are expected to be available. However, many families PCS to find those providers aren't taking patients for 6 months to a year, and that school districts are not appropriately providing or inadequately providing for our disabled children. What can we do to make improvements to the system that will fill this gap for our EFMP military families?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. I don't want you to repeat the whole thing, but help me understand exactly what you're trying to solve here.
I would like to see A solution for families that move, that are placed at installations and told that they'll be able to find providers for their disabled children.
Right.
When we're getting there, we're finding that doctors are not able to see our children for 6 months to a year. There has to be a solution to that issue.
You know, I'll comment on that while maybe the chief or the sergeant major think about it some. What's interesting about this, I've heard both ends of this because it's a very important issue for obvious reasons. When I just came back from Germany, they told me the opposite, Germany and Italy. They said the challenge they're having is soldiers, for example, want to PCS to Europe, but they're being denied because they're being told services are unavailable. And what their complaint is that, look, this is Europe. It's a first world region, first world countries, that they do have all the services and all the providers. And for some reason, somewhere in the system, they're being told, no, it's unavailable, so don't come or you cannot come. And there are soldiers who professionally need to go, want to go, and there are families who want to go. They want to live overseas. The second complaint I've heard along the same line is that the families do not have a voice in the process. Now, again, I don't know whether that's real. I need to tease that out with my staff. But they say they're told it's unavailable, so don't come. And yet the family never has a chance to say, well, look, my daughter's asthma really isn't that bad, or we know that as long as this medication is available in Europe, she'll be okay. So there's something amiss in the system right now because I've heard this from both sides. I'm hearing it from you. I've heard similar things that folks are going to locations and providers aren't there. And then just recently, and I heard the same thing in Alaska, that people are being denied the opportunity to make a move or a professional move because of those same other reasons I just outlined.
So, Tommy Siemens, you out here anywhere? So, I don't know if you're the right guy, and where's Nadja? There you are. So, can you describe the current process? That is, the current process, if you have an EFMP child, what is the current process? So we can peel this back a little bit.
So the current process in order to be cleared to move is a soldier officer identified to PCS, and there's a check with the local area for the medical and education capability in the area. If it's not available, it comes back and the officer does not.
Okay, so pause there for a second. And you're saying that that check comes back, yeah, it's available, but then when you arrive, it's not available. Is that what you're saying?
We were provided orders to a duty station and cleared through FMP and told that it was available.
Okay.
We arrived on station to find that the schools were not adequately prepared to educate high-functioning autistic students, and I had to drive all the way,
Sure, yeah.
an hour and a half to
Right.
get a provider to give
Okay,
him his
so
medications.
what mechanism, if any, is in place to actually confirm or deny? So she's given a little spot report that, hey, she went through the system said EFMP is available in the local area, check. The machine checked all the blocks, and yet when she actually arrives, the providers are not available within a reasonable distance. How do we confirm, deny
Sir,
what the system spits up?
It's a local area commander who assesses what, with the hospital and education services, whether or not it's available. I'll get with you afterwards and we'll find out where the specific place is, and we'll run that back down to see if it's an isolated case or it's more common.
And Nadja, maybe, or?
Hey, thanks, Tom. That's part of it. And also, we work well with Installation Management Command, so it's a multidisciplinary effort to ensure that we provide the best advice to our family members regarding EFMP. So from the medical perspective, what happens is when we find a location that a service member is going to, we want to make sure that the up-to-date physical, and that's one of the things that really helps us, if the physicals are current, to make sure that the condition of the family member, the latest is, like, for example, asthma. Because asthma does change, and for children it can improve, and so we need to make sure that we've got the most up-to-date physical. Then there's a query from the losing installation to the gaining to see if that capability is in the MTF, the military treatment facility. If we don't have that, then we work with our TRICARE representatives to ensure that they have that somewhere in the local community. So sometimes there's that's where the gap is. We know who's in the MTFs that are owned by the services or by the Defense Health Agency, but once you're relying on the network, that can be very fluid. And so there might be a person available that initially takes TRICARE, that might change, or the capacity of that provider might be stretched to the limit where they don't have appointments in a timely manner. And so it's going to be a constant. What we'll do is work, and I'll take it back to work with our Defense Health Agency colleagues to ensure that we have a more real-time information on what's available to ensure that our family members are taken care of.
Is that a DHA thing, or?
Yes, sir, that is. It's jointly, well, now it will be a DHA once the Defense Health Agency assumes responsibility for healthcare delivery within the MTFs. And so currently, if we have military providers that are stationed at the treatment facilities with that specialty, then we do control that where we have our service members, medical service members assigned. But the network is the unknown, and that's one that's going to be in the realm of Defense Health Agency to make sure that we have a mature network of providers who accept TRICARE.
So when you all come back, I'd like to also understand the role of the families and the commanders in this process. It should be more of a dialogue where the families have a voice in this, whether they're being sent somewhere that they don't want to go or can't go, or there are facilities available that they're not. There should be more of a dialogue in the process. The other part I heard from my town hall in Kaiserslautern was this, that by the point in time which in many cases they are told that facilities or care is not ready or is not available is like in the last 30 days. That they've been on orders now for 6 or 7 months, and they find out in the last 30 days that a provider is not available. And what it does is it disrupts the entire system. So you end up, the family gets steered away at the last minute. The unit that has already PCS'd the outgoing soldier and is waiting for the new soldier now has a gap of 6 months to find a new soldier who can come in. And it's causing perturbations within our personnel system as well. So it sounds to me, what I took back from my town hall in K-Town was greater dialogue between doctors, commanders, and families, parents. And second, much needs to happen much earlier in the process. So we don't just contort the system trying to make these moves.
Roger, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your question. Here's a question from a Facebook write-in. Why does it seem that funding for family programs for the Army Reserve has been cut more and more when reserve families are typically away from an installation where they can receive services and are starving for information and resources?
There you go.
Chuck. Chipper. Get that microphone, son. Jump on a grenade.
So I'm talking to Facebook for the first time in my life. So I wouldn't. First of all, I would push back a little bit. We haven't cut funding for anything. What we have done, candidly, is try to make sure that every dollar we invest is going to programs that are paying dividends for our families and for the Army Reserve in terms of building readiness. So I acknowledge that there may be a narrative out there that I have been tough on how we look at some of these programs and execute these programs. But I will tell whoever is asking the question out there, if they're hearing me on Facebook, I'm telling you as leader of this component of the Army, we are not cutting anything. We're trying to make sure we're putting standards and discipline into how we invest money in these programs to develop and to leverage the capabilities that our families expect, acknowledging that in many cases, what we have learned over the last 2 years is that we've been in some cases not managing our money to the best of our ability to do so. And to the extent that we can invest that money, which we are reinvesting, make no doubt about it, we're reinvesting it in making sure that our soldiers are receiving the best training, the best leadership, and the best equipping in the history of America's Army Reserve. And that is a fundamental core tenet of how we get after family programs, family readiness, and taking care of families, which is making sure our soldiers are well-trained, well-led, and well-equipped to deal with the war whenever it comes.
So what you're saying to the questioner is that the same amount of money that was going into family programs in the Army Reserve in, say, 2015, 2016, 2017, is the same amount that's going in 18, and it's the same amount that's programmed in 19. It hasn't been cut.
Chief, what I would say is, no, I would say there are places where we have shifted funding in certain programs that in our assessment, in my assessment, after having looked at this for a significant period of time,
Right.
we're not delivering what we were paying for.
That's fine, that's efficiency, but she's asking about just a broad cut, I think.
Right.
Or he is asking about a broad cut on Facebook. But the aggregate amount of money is roughly flat line and hasn't gone down, or it has?
Well, there are contracts that we have scaled back on because candidly, those contracts were not producing or generating the effects that we are paying for. I mean, as an example, since I'm being asked here a specific question about resourcing, we have found that in many cases we were paying for services that candidly were not being provided in the way that they should have been. So yes, we are holding contractors accountable to the extent that that has freed up money to invest in other things, whether it's family programs or in some cases training. We have shifted investments to take care of our families.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Any comment? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chip.
From Facebook, our next question. What actions are being taken for families living in historic housing on post, homes where lead and mold have become a health issue?
That's a big issue.
Yeah, our Acting Assistant Secretary for IE&E, Jordan Gillis, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, thanks. So, well, first I'll tell you, I take this very seriously. My parents both grew up in those very houses, and folks I served with who are my friends and their families are living in those houses right now. So we're attempting to get after that problem. And also, as a homeowner, I experienced a lot of the same problems with the older houses that I've lived in. But for what the Army does, we're looking to provide an extra level of assurance to let families know that the houses that they're living in are safe. So everyone out there who is interested should have attended one of their garrison town halls. And those town halls were direct communication between the garrison staff, including the garrison commander, and the housing partner, if applicable, to all the residents to let them know what actions are being taken with respect to lead and other environmental hazards. So I'll summarize them really quickly just to give you a flavor for what we're doing. So lead is a hazard generally in paint when it's not properly maintained and when it's not encapsulated. So for 40 years, that's been the approach that we've taken, and that's the approach that the EPA recommends and that the 25 million other homes in the United States that were built before 1978 take. And until recently, we had every reason to believe that has been an effective approach. But news article came up, and Army families came up on the net and gave us reason to feel like we needed to go out and make sure that the approach we've taken has been effective. And so we are going to inspect about 10% of our pre-1978 houses between now and the end of December. And that'll give us a good baseline understanding of whether or not the actions that we have taken with regard to maintaining those homes have been effective. And so by the end of this year, we'll know what additional actions on top of that we need to take, or what we need to do to change our policies and processes to make sure that what we do is effective, because we take our obligation to the families to provide suitable housing very, very seriously.
Let me, if I can, broaden this out a little bit, and I'm going to let Jordan fill in the gaps. The statistics matter here, too. So there are about 98,000 Army homes. Of those, 36,000 were built before 1978. So we're dealing with about 36,000 homes. The sampling has begun. Basically, you get lead poisoning through ingestion of lead. So you're either drinking lead-tainted water or you are eating lead paint chips. So what we've tried to do, and when the team has gone in to look at this, to react to it very quickly, was to not just go in and look at chipped paint in the home, but also to do testing at the tap for lead in the water. We want to make sure when we go and test these older homes that we're anticipating any possible problems. We also have teams going outside the home to make sure that lead paint that may be on the outside of the home isn't leaching in somewhere. And I've also asked them to look at asbestos while we're in those homes. So these are all mitigatable, if you will. Everybody who's in a pre-1978 home should know that. our commitment is this, that if you if you have any reason for concern, we will be within that home within hours, certainly that day, to do testing. And if we come up with a problem and we can't fix it immediately, we will take active measures to get you out of that home as well. But that's our commitment to our Army families, is to make sure that we react quickly as soon as a problem is reported or even suspected. If you suspect a problem, immediately see us, immediately contact your local housing office, and we will get on that immediately. Jordan, anything you want to fill in on that?
No, sir, that's exactly right, but I will reiterate, if you find that your service request is not being responded to quickly enough, or that you have any concerns about the way that it has been responded to, please elevate that through your chain of command or to the garrison commander, and we'll be sure that that's taken care of.
Well, I mean, we know that there's an issue out there with lead paint. In some cases, we know there's an issue in some homes, lead in the water from pipes. Some of these homes are really old. Some of them go back to the 1800s and so on. Secretary mentioned asbestos, and then the mold issue is a big deal with HVACs and so on and so forth. Here's the bottom line: is we, the guys up here in your chain of command, nobody wants any of our soldiers or their family members and their little kids and so on to be at risk. Nobody wants that. So the scope of the problem is large, as the Secretary mentioned, almost 100,000 homes, and half of those almost are relatively old, pre-78. So we're committed to getting it fixed. But I want to reiterate what the Assistant Secretary said. If you, out there in Facebook land or anywhere else, are not getting a response, then my name is Milley, M-I-L-L-E-Y. I'm on Global. There are a couple of Lieutenant Millies out there. But I'm the only four-star General Milley. And this guy here is the only Sergeant Major of the Army daily that I'm aware of. And this is the only Secretary of the Army Esper. All three of our names are in the global email. All three of our names are in the global email. And I'm Mark, he's Dan. So pretty easy, I hope, to find us. And I'm serious heart attack. If there's an issue out there, take a swing at the bat with the local chain of command. Roger that, got it. Take a swing at the bat, calling your service thing. But it's your family's health, and it's your family's safety. And the three of us here do not want it jeopardized. So if you pop an email into our inbox, we look at we get hundreds of emails every day, we scan them out, and I can hit delete real fast if it's nonsense email. But if it's got to do with the health or safety of our soldiers and their families, pop it into one of our boxes, and we will action it. A simple phone call or a simple email from the Secretary of the Army, or me, or Sergeant Major Dan Daly, typically starts blowing through a lot of things real fast. It's just amazing how it works. So I would seriously ask that if there's an issue there in the health safety of families and soldiers with respect to the mold, the lead, the water, the asbestos, or anything else, work it through the chain of command, but don't wait forever and a day. Raise it hard, raise it fast, and who the hell cares about the consequences? Just get the damn thing fixed and get it into one of the three of us, and I guarantee you it'll get fixed.
Yielding to the guest on my left.
Question kind of leads down that way, Chief, that family care, as far as resources for the spouses to have a one-stop shop where they could go online. Most spouses don't want to, if they're having issues at home, don't want to go to the chain of command because a lot of times that's their income, and they think if they're going to get in trouble, we might lose our income or whatever reasons they have for not going to the chain of command. Tommy, no. Is there a one-stop shop, Army One Source, or something that covers down on a place where a spouse can go if they have issues? They notice that their husband's having issues, their husband's not wanting to get help or something like that source. Second part of that question, opioid epidemic, chiropractors, an alternative medicine. I'm curious why we haven't welcomed him into our ranks and as green suiters. We have, for example, one at Fort Lewis, and that's tapped out all the time. That we're looking at a lot of our troops don't have that readily available. It would be great for them to have one downrange in training and available at all times so that they could avoid those injuries later in life.
Let me do the second part first, Leroy, with the chiropractor, and ask Nadja West if you would comment on that, and then come back with either Gwen or the Sergeant Major on the one-stop, one source for issues, problems that a spouse may want to raise but is concerned about blowback in the event she raises it or he raises it. So, Nadja?
Hey, thanks so much for that question. And I think you'd be really surprised to see a lot of the alternative or complementary medicine that we have now even within our ranks because it's recognized that it's really important. The traditional medicine is very important, but we have a lot of acupuncturists in uniform for pain management that actually go and get trained in that art of alternative therapy for pain. And also chiropractors. In fact, we have chiropractors within our military treatment facilities, and it's just now being recognized as a specialty that the TRICARE will reimburse for, because that's been an issue. We've been trying to get it a reimbursable alternate or complementary therapy within our within the whole TRICARE benefit. And so as far as having an additional or a new military occupational specialty in the Army where we have green-suited chiropractors, that's going to be more difficult, I believe, because it's not just the Army. All three services have to agree to have another type of occupational specialty added to the list of the about 120 plus MOSs that we already have. And we've actually decreased the numbers.
So what you're saying is we do have chiropractors.
Yes, sir.
But they're civilian chiropractors.
Yes, sir. They're either civilian.
Working in U.S. military treatment facilities.
Yes, sir. They're either civilian or contractors that are in our MTFs.
But they're part of the MTFs.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then in addition to that, TRICARE, you can use TRICARE and go to someone in the provider network. But what we don't have
not
is...
yet. Not yet. We're trying to get the...
Not yet.
Not yet, but we've asked TRICARE or asked the Defense Health Agency to expand the TRICARE benefit to include chiropractor. Yes, sir.
So, Leroy, we have chiropractors, civilian contractors in the system, working on TRICARE, and what action are we taking, or should we take, to create an MOS called chiropractor in the medical corps?
Sir, if there's a need, we would do using the total Army analysis process of what our requirements are. If it's deemed that that's a requirement that should be part of our military inventory, then we would use the process to bring that on. We're also looking at changing...
So right now, there's no action or initiative that's already been initiated within the system in order to create something, an MOS for chiropractors in uniform. Is that true?
Yes, sir. Not specifically for that.
So the short answer to your question is, there's nothing being done right now. Just get with me afterwards and tell me why you think that's a good idea. I don't know if good idea or not a good idea. We can take it on, take a look at it, and determine what the advantages and disadvantages are on chiropractors in uniform versus contractors or civilians, and/or using TRICARE. So we'll take a look at that.
Sir, I would add that we do have some similar modalities. We do have our medical specialty corps, which has physical therapists, occupational therapists, and with the initiative to have those individuals forward deployed. So they do offer some spinal manipulation or types of modalities that are similar to, not specifically chiropractors, but have an effect of that as well.
Okay. And then either Sergeant Major or Gwen, can you answer the piece about for spouses, a place for them to go where they have some privacy?
I was going to recommend the Military One Source as a data point of entry for your the spousal issues, because you could be linked up, and depending on the level of specificity, the operator can direct him or her to someone who can help them with their need. Military One Source.
Sergeant Major?
Yeah, and absolutely. It really depends on the issue. I mean, Military One Source is your one-stop shop, 24-hour call center that can answer you or direct you to the right resource if you need, if that's not specific to what Military One Source does, but they cover a large gamut of things. I would tell you is that give the chain of command a try. Many issues I get in my email box, and the chief is right, I respond to them 24/7. And the first place I have to go to is the chain of command. And many times they don't even know. And I ask you, don't be afraid. We have some of the finest men and women in leadership positions that the world and this nation can offer. And I have never seen retribution against a soldier. And when it comes to us, we ensure that. And the chief and I ensure that. I know the secretary does the same, that doesn't happen. And we don't handle those things in a way. Because the chain of command has, if they haven't dealt with it, I'm sure they've had somebody who has dealt with it within their formations. And you got to give them the opportunity. But along with that, the plug for ACS, it's our good, what I call the good old-fashioned one-stop on the installation. They've got so many things, much of which is underutilized, that they can offer. And I promise that if you walk in their door, or you call their phone, they can fix your problem or get you to the resource or get you to the right care that you need to fix the problem. So I always love the ACS because it is available, and they do such a wonderful job there. And of course, if it's something that needs to be secure, don't forget our great chaplain corps. I know I saw the chaplain out here, and I know you'd be happy I put a plug in for them. So they're always a great resource as well. So multiple resources out there. But please don't sell the fact that we have some of the best leaders in the world, and the chain of command should be the first stop for soldiers.
I just want to add a few things, a different perspective. If I bring one advantage to this job, is it's the advantage of having left the service twice, literally, and then coming back in. And I will tell you, one of the things I've been most impressed by is the degree to which the Army has expanded the services it provides for our soldiers and for the families. Lee and I didn't know anything about tutor.com and all these other things. We used our share of MWR and ACS over the years. But what I've also found is this. Somewhere over time, some things have weakened. One of the things has been the sponsorship program. And so I can tell you, we did a meet and greet with some spouses at Fort Hood, I think, right? And a young spouse, her husband came from Hawaii. He immediately went to the field. She went to their house, received their household goods on time. Or, I'm sorry, got their house, but didn't receive their household goods. So she was in that house for 3 weeks with nothing and didn't know about the lending closet. And so what I'm tending to find is the sponsorship program, and the Sergeant Major and I have talked about this a few times, really needs to be improved, because it's these young spouses, these new spouses who don't know the Army well, who don't know about ACS and MWR and lending closets and tutor.com and on and on and on. All these programs that are out there, all these great either employees or volunteers who are more than willing to help. And I got to repeat as well, I've never found anybody in the chain of command who wouldn't want to help. But I know that fear is out there, but we have to just talk to our young soldiers and their spouses about the chain of command is there to help us to solve problems. And I'd encourage all that. But I think we need to do a better job on sponsorship in the Army, and I think that will help address, better marry up the supply with the demand out there.
Okay, we have two guests that have questions on my right and then my left.
Hi. We were talking about chiropractic care, and I was just wondering if that's available for spouses as well. And if it is, I'm not sure that that's being communicated necessarily to the providers within the TRICARE system.
So thank you for that question. So if the chiropractors are within the military treatment facilities, it's all based upon the capacity that they have. So the number one priority is for the active duty members, just to make sure that's the readiness piece that we really have to get after. So if there's enough capacity to see family members, then they will see them. If not, then they'll have to just limit it to active duty only. So it depends. It depends on what's available at each installation for the availability. Thanks.
Most of the facilities only have one. That's right. Fort Lewis, you know how big Fort Lewis is, and so family members never get in there. It's priority active duty, and they can't even get in there sometimes. Right. And so that's why I brought up the issue of chiropractor, because it is a lot of families, spouses especially, that need the care.
Absolutely, thank you for that, and that's one that we'll take back to see if there's a way to expand that. Again, working with the Defense Health Agency to expand those, and then also to see if there are other provider types that can provide similar types of therapeutic intervention, such as our physical therapists, physical therapy techs, and those who can that can assist with that as well. And we also have DOs, doctors of osteopathic medicine, which are similar to they have an educational background as similar four-year school as MDs, but they also do spinal manipulation as part of their training as well. And so they're not chiropractors or doctors of osteopathic medicine, but we do have many of those that are within our ranks, both in uniform and civilians that are in our installations as well, that can offer that capability. Thanks.
Thank you for your question.
Hi,
On my left?
This is a follow-up to the question on housing, and I really appreciate how proactive you are about addressing some of the lead, mold, asbestos in the housing and working with the families who are living in that housing now. But we've talked a lot today about that Army families move. And so as part of your efforts, if you, through this survey, find houses that have a lot of these problems, will it be possible to do a look back on who maybe lived in that house last year or 2 years ago to let them know, here's what we found, maybe you need to get your child tested for lead. Given how much our Army families move and those houses change hands, I would hope that you're also looking to who lived there last or even 2 times ago.
Okay, Jordan Gillis.
So I'll take that, but I may step on General West's toes a little bit, so I'll let her correct me after I start. One of the things about lead is that the house isn't the only risk factor, and when you go to your primary care provider for your child, one of the things that the primary care provider does is screen for risk factors, which include, do you live in an old house? Do your parents make lead fishing weights as a hobby? So things like that. And depending on where your child screens for risk factors, that'll tell the provider whether or not a lead blood test needs to be performed. So I can take back the issue of linking the house to the residence, because that seems like a good idea, but primarily it's your child's health care provider that'll provide the screening that would get at any risk factors that would be at play.
So the concern would be, maybe I'm not living in an old house now, but I was a year ago. And so I think that might be helpful for families to know that the Army is thinking about that house and who might have lived there recently.
No, I appreciate that, and we'll take that back. And I'll add to some of the efforts that we've undertaken to inspect the homes. We also realized that maybe there was some complacency around the education of folks who were taking those homes, and education around the hazard that lead and other things pose. And so we've created a video and done some other things to reinvigorate some of the information that people get when they first show up and sign for quarters. So that education piece, should help get after, letting families know what the hazards are and how to talk to their primary care provider about that. But thank you. I will take back the idea of linking the homes and the residents.
We're going to figure out a system to do what you just said.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I'd also obviously encourage anybody, if you just PCS'd 1 or 2 times ago and you know you lived in one of those old homes, I'm always reminded of the white elephants at Fort Benning, go get tested. I mean, don't wait for us. Go get tested.
But we do have lists. We do have names. We do know who occupied the house. We'll figure this one out. That was a great suggestion there. So we got it.
Thank you for your question. On my right?
All the way down here. Hello, gentlemen. So I am one of those people that have lived in that house, and I have incredible health issues that I rarely speak of. I brought it up to the privatized housing. Nothing was done. I personally paid $820 out of pocket for mold testing, gave it to our community forum. Nothing was done. I'm really sorry that I have to stand here and bring it up to you today, but I know that I'm not alone. Please help me hold these companies accountable.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It takes a great deal of courage to share that. What's important now is for us to make sure we help you and your family. And second, track down, get the information from you so we can track down what happened and hold people accountable. So if I'd ask you now or afterwards, come see Jordan Gillis. I'll join you at the front. Let's find out where you were, what time, who you spoke to, so we can investigate the matter. And then at the same time, I'll ask General West, the Surgeon General, to get with you and figure out how we address the health pieces of it too, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Are you still in the military?
Yes, sir, very much.
Okay.
Okay, so just join us up down front here afterward, if you don't mind.
Are there others right now in this crowd anyway that are similar?
Somebody raising a hand in back. Is there somebody that's reported, here's a simple, has somebody reported mold, lead, those types of concerns to your local housing office and received no response? If so, raise your hand.
We have
Two.
someone
One,
too.
two. Okay, please come up and, is somebody over here? Come up and see myself and Jordan afterwards so we can find out where that is and find out what's going on, because that, we need to get to the bottom of that, you know, and make sure we fix it retroactively, but prospectively as well, and hold folks accountable.
My daughter lived in a home where they were having health issues because mold occurred shortly after they moved in, had to jump through several fiery hoops and take it all the way up to the garrison before they were allowed to move to a new house. And then they came to find out that the two families before them had to move for the same reason. And 2 weeks after they left, housing painted over it and moved a new family in and never fixed the problem.
Yeah, so if that's that's unsatisfactory. So we must do a better job, and I'm now speaking to our folks who work in the garrisons and all this. That's it's unconscionable. We need to do a better job. That does not fall in line with what the chief and I said about taking care of families. I will tell you, one of the things we've done in the FY20 budget is shift a lot of funding in the next few years to get our Q4 and Q3 housing out of being Q4 and Q3 housing, simply to try and tackle the housing problem. But with your case as well, I apologize if that's happened, and come see us afterwards so we can get the details and track it down and get to the bottom line and resolve the issue.
Thank you for your question. I think we'll have time for two more questions. This one from Facebook. Can the Army go back to upfront dislocation allowance when PCSing? Using the government credit card for allowed things is great, but DLA for most ranks is better served on the front end of a PCS. It helps to deal with rental costs at new stations. AR mentioned in Forum 2 having to loan for such things. DLA upfront used to help with these type of issues.
I'll take that one. So, yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can still request an advance pay prior to PCSing. Am I right, G1, sir?
You just said yes.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's right. So, and that's just oh, go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
I was just saying that's an option to request an advance pay, whether it's advance pay or dislocation allowance. It would all be, reconciled on the backside, but there is an avenue to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But it sounds like the questioner thinks that's not an option. Is that right? The way the
Right. Can the Army go back to upfront dislocation allowance when PCSing?
The way it used to occur, sir, well, back in the day when you went to the pay cash allowance, you used to literally they used to count out the cash of dislocation allowance, pay you up front prior to. The credit card allows us, obviously, to be able to, for the soldier and the family member, to incur charges on that card. And then when they PCS and sign the new station, those charges are then paid back by when they turn in their paperwork to receive dislocation allowance. If the soldier anticipates when we have a high-cost move overseas or Alaska or Hawaii, they can request an advance pay or an advanced DLA in order to offset some of those costs up front.
Okay, so the old system is still allowable. You can still do it, you just got to request it.
That's right.
It's part of the levy process, sir. When they ask, do you have any weapons, do you have any things like that? One of the questions is, would you like an advance pay? If you do, you request it.
So you can still do it. It's not mandated that you do the credit card thing.
No, sir.
You have an option to do it. Okay. All right. Good enough.
Go ahead.
Thank you. On my left.
So this is actually tied to what was just being talked about. The dislocation allowance, you're really supposed to use that for first month's rent, last month's rent, all those security deposits. You can't put those on a credit card. So the government travel card doesn't really help you in those situations. So, and really the DLA is an allowance. It's not prorated like some of your move expenses. So you could still get that up until just a few years ago. You could get a DLA, the advanced DLA.
That's right.
It's a calculated amount. So I had the same frustration when I moved here. You know, all of those expenses that you pay to set up your home, That's what the DLA was for, and you can't put those on your government travel card. So.
But I think what I'm hearing is you can still get DLA.
Sir, you can't put it on your government credit card, but what you can do is get an advance pay that
That's what I'm
goes
saying.
into
You
your
can
bank
still
account.
get an advance pay, right? Say again?
So advance pays are prorated over 12 months. So when I take my advance pay,
Right.
that ends up getting prorated over 12 months.
Right.
Where the dislocation allowance is a one-time payment that I'm actually owed when I move.
So do we or do we not give dislocation allowance?
Sir, upon moving into the new place, you get a dislocation allowance. You can get a advance pay that you can settle up from 12 months.
No. Two different terms. I don't want to, I don't want to drag you through
Yes,
the
sir.
weeds here in a public forum, but I might as well, right? So,
We still give dislocation.
so do we give dislocation allowance?
Yes, sir.
Does that dislocation allowance go into your checking account?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, and in addition to that, if you request, you can get a 1 month or 2 month or 3 month advance pay or whatever it is, prorated over 12 months.
Yes,
That's
sir.
two different pays.
Yes, sir. I think the question
that
is
true
when you
or
get your
false?
dislocation allowance.
Can you get the advance pay?
Yes,
Yeah, okay, so you can get advance pay and dislocation allowance.
yes.
Two different things, and you can get them both in your checking account.
Yes, sir.
And you don't have to use a checking or a credit card.
Yes, sir.
Or you can do none of the above, just use a credit card,
Incur expenses on the card.
incur expenses on the card.
Yes, sir.
Or none of the above, and just pay for it out of pocket,
Yes, sir. And get reimbursed.
and you get reimbursed, right?
So
So
I
you
don't
can, so
understand
those
the
are
issue.
options
Yeah.
for the individual to choose. Is that what you're telling me, right?
Yes, sir.
And you're saying that's not option?
So the dislocation allowance you used to be able to get before you PCS'd, so that when
Yes.
you got to your new duty
Yes.
station, you could actually
Yes.
use it. You can't do that anymore.
Okay, so you're saying you can do that?
You get it
So
in
we
the
have an
back
issue.
end.
Sir, you get an advance pay.
No, not advance pay, dislocation
sir.
allowance. Don't default back to that term, advance pay. Can you get a dislocation allowance prior to moving from point A to point B?
Sir, I can't confirm that with a check.
Okay, because everyone out here is saying kind of no.
You cannot unless you have a government travel card.
Yes, yes.
If you have a government travel card, you cannot, a government travel card, you cannot get a DLA up
Okay.
front before you move.
I got it now, so, I got it now. So, we're gonna dig into that. And what does it take? Just take Secretary Esper to sign something, right? Huh? Give it up. Give it up for Esper. Huh? You want this, right? He's the people's secretary. Give it up for him right now. Huh? All right. He's going to make this happen in 24 hours. You watch. He's bad to the bone. West Point, 86. First reg.
There you go.
Here's the pen right here.
I'm signing.
All right, we're going to dig into that, okay?
We'll
Yeah,
take it on.
we need to
got
dig
it.
into and find out. It sounds like there are a variety of things happening here, but I understand what you're saying, but on the other hand, if you get the pay up front, you're going to make it up on the back end with DLA. I'd be more concerned about the timeliness of DLA as well, but I'd have to know why we stopped doing it up front also. And it's not just for, as you know, it's not just for first month's deposits, for shower curtains and all that other stuff you have to buy when you move and that you throw away. So, but we'll dig into it. It's a good issue. These are exactly the type of things we like to hear about because it allows us to take feedback from you all and then fix it and make it right, make it make sense.
You want to do one more bonus one?
Okay, one more.
One more bonus.
Okay, so from Facebook, there was a lot of talk about referring spouses to ACS Employment Readiness during Family Forum 2 this morning. What is the future of funding for Army family programs at Army Community Service?
Gwen, why don't you answer that?
It's a great question. What we talk about is making sure that we align our resources to those programs, activities, and services that really provide, I'll say, best bang for the buck. And so we are in the throes of looking at all of our programs, reassessing them as it relates to soldier lethality and readiness, and that process is ongoing right now as we speak.
And if I could, and this is just a statement I'd like to reinforce when I first opened was, we definitely have to know the issues and concerns, but we also need help on what we don't need. And this is important. There is a limit to our resources. And geographic location makes a difference. A bowling alley is much more important at the National Training Center than it is on Fort Belvoir. I don't know, well, it might be important on Fort Belvoir too, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. But there's a lot of things, frankly, that are underutilized that we could do without. And we could take those resources and put them back in the things that our families need, or put them back into the warfighter's hands. Because the Secretary and the Chief have some pretty big bills to pay for to make sure that our modernization is at a rate that's competitive with our potential adversaries. Not that we don't want to provide the best possible care we can to our families, but we also don't want to waste money on things that aren't being used. So you got to help us, and I say that everywhere I go, is not only tell us what we need to fix, but tell us what we don't need to keep.
I want to say thank you to each of our senior leaders this afternoon for a great job and for answering all of your questions this afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, General Milley, and SMA. Thank you so much. This concludes our town hall this afternoon. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. I'm going to go down here and see these. Yeah, I think we can get a nice deal. I'm going to check.
Before you all leave, I was just going to close it off, but this is the end of the call for it. That's all right. Oh, do you think I can get a picture before you?
Yeah.
Before.
They want to get a photo.
Is it okay if I get a photo with you guys?
Sure.
I've never had one with you all.
And I want to meet these. Setting you up for success. Thanks. Photo of all. Quick photo. Where do you want to do it? Right here? Put Drew in the middle, man. General Bingham, she wants you in here.
I'm sorry. Absolutely. Thank you.